I stood in the departure lounge at Portland International Airport, watching planes taxi across the tarmac as dawn broke over the city. My phone buzzed with a text from my boss, confirming the details of our 3-week pharmaceutical conference in Boston. As a senior research director for a biotech company, these trips were part of the job, but leaving my house always made me slightly anxious. I owned a beautiful craftsman home in the Hawthorne district, a property I had saved for years to buy, and it represented everything I had worked for since moving to Portland a decade ago. My younger sister Vanessa had been staying in a cramped studio apartment across town with her boyfriend Julian for the past 6 months. Every time we spoke, she complained about their living situation, dropping hints that I had plenty of space and rarely used all my rooms. I had deflected these suggestions with polite excuses, knowing that Vanessa had a history of taking advantage of kindness and turning temporary arrangements into permanent impositions. Our mother had warned me about this pattern years ago, recounting stories of Vanessa borrowing money that was never repaid and overstaying welcomes at family gatherings until someone finally asked her to leave. The flight attendant called my boarding group, and I gathered my carry-on bag, pushing thoughts of Vanessa aside. I had locked all the doors, set the alarm system, and arranged for my neighbor Jeffrey to check the mail and water the plants. Everything was secure. My house would be exactly as I left it when I returned in 3 weeks. Boston greeted me with humid air and crowded streets. The conference hotel was a towering glass structure in the financial district, and my schedule was packed with presentations, panel discussions, and networking dinners. On the second day, I delivered a keynote speech about emerging treatments for autoimmune disorders, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Colleagues from across the country approached me afterward, discussing potential collaborations and research opportunities. I felt energized by the work, grateful for a career that challenged and fulfilled me. That evening, I returned to my hotel room and checked my phone. There were 3 missed calls from Vanessa and a text message that made my blood run cold. "Hey sis, Julian and I moved into your place today. You are rich and we need a home. I'm sure you don't mind. We brought all our stuff and cleared out some of your old junk to make room. Thanks for being so generous." I read the message 3 times, each word sinking deeper into my consciousness like stones dropping into dark water. My hands trembled as I immediately called Vanessa, but she did not answer. I tried again and again, my anxiety escalating with each unanswered ring. Finally, I called Jeffrey, my neighbor, and asked him to check on my house. He called back 20 minutes later, his voice tight with concern. "Christina, there are people living in your house. A younger woman and a man. They told me you gave them permission to stay there while you were away. I saw moving boxes stacked in your garage and noticed some of your furniture is gone." My heart hammered against my ribcage. I gave no such permission. They broke into my house. Jeffrey was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me to call the police?" I thought quickly, weighing my options. "Not yet. Let me try to reach Vanessa first. I need to understand what she has done." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the city lights beyond my window. Rage and disbelief warred within me. Vanessa had always been impulsive and entitled, but this was a violation I could never have anticipated. She had entered my home without permission, displaced my belongings, and installed herself as though my property was hers to claim. I called her again, and this time she answered, her voice bright and cheerful. "Christina, did you get my message? We're all moved in. The house is perfect." "Vanessa, what the hell are you doing?" My voice was low and controlled, each word deliberate. "You do not have permission to be in my house." She laughed, a dismissive sound that made my jaw clench. "Oh, come on. You're gone for 3 weeks. We were desperate. Our lease ended and we had nowhere else to go. You're hardly ever home anyway, and you have 3 bedrooms. It's not like you're using all that space." "That is not the point," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "It is my house. You cannot just move in without asking. You need to leave immediately." "We can't leave," Vanessa said, her tone turning defensive. "We signed out of our lease. We have nowhere to go. Besides, you have plenty of money. You can afford to share." I closed my eyes, trying to process the absurdity of her logic. "Vanessa, I do not care what situation you are in. You broke into my house. That is illegal. If you do not leave, I will call the police." She scoffed. "You would not do that to your own sister. Mom would be so disappointed in you." The mention of our mother stung, but I refused to let Vanessa manipulate me with guilt. "Mom would be disappointed in you for stealing from me. Get out of my house, Vanessa. I mean it." She hung up without another word, and I was left staring at my phone, fury and helplessness washing over me in waves. I called Jeffrey again and asked him to document everything he could see from the outside. He agreed, promising to take photos and keep an eye on the situation. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake in the unfamiliar hotel room, my mind racing through scenarios and consequences. Part of me wanted to fly back to Portland immediately, but I had responsibilities at the conference. I was scheduled to moderate a crucial panel discussion the next morning, and several investors were counting on my presence at meetings throughout the week. I could not simply abandon my professional obligations, no matter how desperate I felt. The following day, I navigated the conference in a fog of distraction. Between sessions, I called Vanessa repeatedly, but she had stopped answering. I left voicemails demanding that she vacate my property, but my messages went unanswered. I contacted a lawyer in Portland, explaining the situation, and he advised me to file a police report for trespassing and unlawful entry. He also mentioned that eviction proceedings could take weeks, even under these circumstances, because of tenant protection laws. "But they are not tenants," I protested. "They broke into my house without permission." "I understand," he said patiently, "but the law can be complicated. If they establish residency, even without a formal lease, removing them becomes more difficult. You need to act quickly before they can claim squatters' rights." His words sent a chill through me. I thanked him and immediately called the Portland Police Department, filing a report over the phone. The officer I spoke with was sympathetic, but explained that because this was a civil matter involving family, they would need to investigate before taking action. They promised to send someone to check on the property within 48 hours. 2 days passed in agonizing slowness. I attended conference sessions, smiled at networking events, and delivered presentations, all while my mind remained thousands of miles away in Portland. Jeffrey sent me updates and photos. In one image, I saw Vanessa lounging on my porch swing, a glass of wine in her hand, looking completely at ease. Another photo showed Julian carrying my belongings out to the curb in garbage bags. My stomach twisted with nausea at the sight. On the 4th day of the conference, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously, and a male voice identified himself as Officer Benjamin from the Portland Police Department. "Miss Christina, we visited your property today. Your sister and her boyfriend are indeed occupying the residence. They claim you gave them verbal permission to stay there while you were away." "That is absolutely false," I said, my voice shaking. "I never gave them permission. They broke in." "There is no sign of forced entry," Officer Benjamin said carefully. "Do they have a key to the property?" I hesitated, my mind racing back through recent weeks. Then I remembered. 2 months ago, Vanessa had visited for dinner. I had given her my spare key to let herself in because I was running late from work. She had never returned it. At the time, I had not thought much about it, assuming she had simply forgotten. Now I realized it had been deliberate. "She took my spare key during a previous visit," I explained. "But that does not give her the right to move in without permission." Officer Benjamin sighed. "Unfortunately, without proof of forced entry and given that she has a key, this becomes more complicated. We can document the situation, but you may need to pursue this through civil court. I would recommend filing for an emergency restraining order and starting eviction proceedings immediately," I thanked him and hung up, feeling defeated and furious in equal measure. Vanessa had planned this carefully, taking advantage of my absence and exploiting legal gray areas to establish herself in my home. The realization that my own sister had calculated and executed this betrayal with such precision filled me with a cold, focused anger. That evening, I sat alone in a hotel restaurant, picking at a salad I had no appetite for, and began forming a plan. If Vanessa wanted to play games with property and legality, I would show her exactly what those games look like when someone with resources and determination decided to fight back. I had spent years building my career and my life, and I would not let her destroy it with her entitlement and theft. I called my lawyer again and outlined what I wanted to do. He listened carefully, occasionally interjecting with questions or suggestions. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment before responding. "That is aggressive, but it is legal. Are you certain you want to go this route with your sister?" "She stopped being my sister the moment she broke into my house and threw away my belongings," I said flatly. "I want her to understand that actions have consequences." He agreed to begin the necessary paperwork immediately. Over the next 2 days, while I continued attending the conference, he filed for an emergency restraining order, initiated eviction proceedings, and prepared documentation for a civil lawsuit claiming damages and theft. He also contacted the police to emphasize that I had never given Vanessa or Julian permission to enter or occupy my property. Meanwhile, I reached out to Jeffrey and asked him to continue monitoring the situation. He reported that Vanessa and Julian seemed to be settling in comfortably, hosting friends on my patio, and playing loud music late into the evening. Neighbors were beginning to complain, he said, which would work in my favor if the situation escalated. On the 7th day of my trip, I received a text from Vanessa. "Stop being dramatic. We're just borrowing the house for a while. You can afford it." I did not respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to my lawyer as additional evidence of her admission that she had taken unauthorized possession of my property. He confirmed that it strengthened our case and assured me that things were moving forward quickly. The conference finally concluded, and I boarded my flight back to Portland with grim determination. I had 2 more days before I originally planned to return, but I changed my flight to arrive early, wanting to confront the situation directly. As the plane descended through the clouds over the city, I stared out at the landscape below, thinking about everything that had changed in just 10 days. I had always tried to maintain a relationship with Vanessa despite her flaws, believing that family bonds were worth preserving. Our parents had divorced when we were teenagers, and our mother had worked 2 jobs to keep us fed and housed. I had responded by throwing myself into my studies, earning scholarships and building a stable future. Vanessa had responded with resentment, always feeling that life owed her more than she had been given. She cycled through jobs and relationships, blaming others for her failures and expecting family to bail her out when things fell apart. But this was different. This was not borrowing money or asking for a temporary place to stay. This was theft, invasion, and a complete disregard for everything I had worked to build. I had tried to be understanding, tried to help when I could, but Vanessa had mistaken my kindness for weakness. Now she would learn the difference. The plane landed at dusk, and I collected my luggage quickly, eager to see my house and assess the full extent of the damage. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver my address, watching the familiar streets pass by as we drove through the city. When we turned onto my block, my chest tightened with apprehension. The house looked the same from the outside, its pale blue exterior and white trim unchanged. But as I paid the driver and approached the front door, I noticed details that made my anger flare. The porch furniture had been rearranged, and there were empty beer bottles lined up along the railing. My welcome mat was missing, replaced by a garish one with a cartoon cactus that I had never seen before. I unlocked the door with my key and stepped inside, and what I saw made me stop in my tracks. The living room had been completely transformed. My cream-colored sofa was gone, replaced by a sagging brown couch that reeked of cigarette smoke. My bookshelves, which had held carefully curated collections of medical journals and literature, were empty. In their place were cheap particle board shelves stacked with action movies and video games. The walls, which I had painted a soft sage green, were now covered with posters of rock bands and sports teams. I walked through the house in stunned silence, cataloging every violation. In the kitchen, my dishes were piled unwashed in the sink, and the counters were sticky with spills. My dining room table, an antique oak piece I had inherited from my grandmother, was gone. In its place was a flimsy folding table surrounded by mismatched plastic chairs. The bedrooms were even worse. My master bedroom, where I had spent years creating a peaceful sanctuary, had been overtaken by Vanessa's belongings. My bed was still there, but it was unmade and covered with her clothes. My closet had been emptied, and I found garbage bags in the hallway filled with my clothing, some of which had been carelessly damaged. I walked through every room, taking photos with my phone, documenting everything. The guest bedrooms had been similarly invaded, filled with boxes and random items that clearly belonged to Vanessa and Julian. My home office, where I had worked on research papers and grant proposals, had been turned into a storage room, my desk buried under their possessions. In the garage, I found the most heartbreaking discovery. My grandmother's china, my childhood photo albums, my college diplomas, and countless other irreplaceable items had been piled haphazardly in the corner, some broken, some water-damaged. They had treated my life like trash, discarding what mattered to me to make room for their chaos. I stood in the garage, surrounded by the remnants of my carefully built life, and felt something inside me harden into cold resolve. Vanessa was not here. Neither was Julian. According to Jeffrey, they often left for hours during the day, treating my house like a hotel. They could come and go from as they pleased. I returned to the living room and sat on their ugly couch, ignoring the smell, and called my lawyer. When he answered, I spoke with icy calm. I am back in Portland. I am in my house. It is worse than I imagined. I want to move forward with everything we discussed. No mercy. He assured me that the paperwork was ready and that we could proceed immediately. He had already scheduled a court hearing for the emergency restraining order and eviction notice for the following afternoon. The judge, he explained, had reviewed the preliminary evidence and was prepared to expedite the case given the circumstances. I thanked him and hung up, then sat in silence, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and sounds of my violated home. An hour later, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Voices floated through the front door, laughing and carefree. The key turned in the lock, and Vanessa walked in with Julian trailing behind her, both carrying shopping bags. They froze when they saw me sitting on the couch, their expressions shifting from surprise to something like guilt, though Vanessa quickly masked it with defiance. "Christina," she said, forcing a smile, "you're back early. We weren't expecting you for another week." I stood slowly, my eyes moving from her face to Julian's and back again. "I changed my plans. Funny how having your home invaded tends to rearrange your priorities." Julian shifted uncomfortably, setting his bags down. He was tall and thin, with nervous energy that made him seem younger than his 30 years. "Look, we can explain." "There is nothing to explain," I said, my voice level. "You broke into my house, threw away my belongings, and moved in without permission. Those are facts, not misunderstandings." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "We did not break in. I had a key. And we did not throw anything away. We just packed up some stuff you were not using to make room. You're being ridiculous." I gestured toward the hallway. "I found garbage bags full of my clothes. I found my grandmother's china broken in the garage. I found my furniture missing. Where is my dining table, Vanessa?" She shrugged. "We sold it. That old thing was worth like $800. We needed cash for groceries." The casual admission took my breath away. "You sold my grandmother's table? The one she left me when she died?" "It was just a table," Vanessa said dismissively. "You can buy another one. You have plenty of money." Something in my expression must have warned her, because she took a step back. Julian put a hand on her arm, his face pale. "Maybe we should talk about this calmly," he said. "There is nothing to talk about," I said. "You are both going to leave my house right now tonight. Pack your things and get out." Vanessa laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "We're not going anywhere. We live here now. You can't just kick us out." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen, where I had opened the email from my lawyer containing copies of the legal documents. "Actually, I can. I have filed for an emergency restraining order and eviction proceedings. There is a court hearing tomorrow afternoon. The police have documented your unauthorized entry. You have no legal right to be here, and if you do not leave voluntarily tonight, I will call the police and have you removed." Vanessa's face flushed red. "You wouldn't. You're my sister." "You stopped being my sister when you stole from me," I said coldly. "You have 1 hour to pack whatever belongs to you and leave. Anything of mine that you have damaged or sold, I will be suing you for in civil court. That includes the table, the furniture, and every single item I can document." Julian tugged at Vanessa's arm. "Come on, we should go. This isn't worth it." But Vanessa shook him off, her eyes blazing with fury. "This is so typical of you, Christina. Always thinking you're better than everyone else. Always lording your success over the rest of us. I needed help and you weren't here, so I took what I needed. Family is supposed to help each other." "Help is something you ask for," I said. "This is theft, and you are going to face the consequences." She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. 59 minutes now. I suggest you start packing." For a moment, I thought she might refuse, might escalate the confrontation into something physical. But Julian pulled her toward the hallway, whispering urgently in her ear. They disappeared into the master bedroom, and I heard the sounds of frantic movement, drawers slamming and angry muttering. I sat back down on the couch and called Jeffrey, asking him to come over as a witness. He arrived within 10 minutes, his elderly face creased with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I will be," I said. "Thank you for everything you have done. I could not have managed this without your help." He nodded and took a seat in the kitchen, positioning himself where he could see the hallway. The next hour passed in tense silence, broken only by the sounds of Vanessa and Julian gathering their belongings. They made multiple trips to their car, loading boxes and bags with aggressive thuds and slams. Vanessa shot me venomous looks each time she passed through the living room, but she did not speak. Finally, Julian appeared in the doorway, his arms full of the last boxes. "We're leaving," he said quietly. "But this isn't over." "You are right," I said. "I will see you in court." Vanessa emerged behind him, her face tear-streaked and furious. "I hope you're happy," she spat. "I hope you enjoy your perfect little life in your perfect little house. You always were selfish." I stood and walked to the door, holding it open. "Goodbye, Vanessa." She stalked past me without another word, and Julian followed, avoiding my eyes. I watched them load the final boxes into their battered sedan and drive away, their taillights disappearing into the darkness. Only then did I close and lock the door, setting the deadbolt and the chain. Jeffrey stood and put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. "I know," I said, though my voice trembled slightly. "Thank you for being here." After he left, I walked through the house again, this time with cleaning supplies and trash bags. I worked through the night, scrubbing surfaces, throwing away garbage, and beginning the process of reclaiming my space. Every corner I cleaned felt like a small victory, a step toward restoration. By dawn, the house was at least sanitary, though it would take weeks to fully repair the damage and replace what had been stolen or destroyed. I slept for a few hours, then showered and dressed in a sharp navy suit for the court hearing. My lawyer met me at the courthouse, reviewing the documentation one final time before we entered the courtroom. Vanessa and Julian were already there, sitting in the back row with a court-appointed mediator, who had attempted to negotiate a settlement before the hearing. I had refused all settlement offers. This was not about money or compromise. This was about accountability. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia, called the case and reviewed the evidence. My lawyer presented the police report, the photos of the damage, Jeffrey's testimony, and copies of Vanessa's text messages admitting to taking possession of my house without permission. Vanessa's court-appointed representative argued that it was a family dispute and that I was being vindictive, but Judge Patricia's expression made it clear she was not swayed. "Miss Vanessa," the judge said, looking over her glasses at my sister, "you entered your sister's property without explicit permission, removed and sold her belongings, and caused substantial damage. The fact that you are related does not exempt you from the law. I am granting the emergency restraining order, which prohibits you from coming within 500 feet of the property or contacting Miss Christina directly. I am also ordering immediate eviction, effective as of this moment, and ruling that you are responsible for restitution for all documented damages." Vanessa's face crumpled. "But we already left. We don't have anywhere to go." "That is not the court's concern," Judge Patricia said firmly. "You should have considered the consequences before you broke into someone's home. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel struck, and I felt a wave of vindication wash over me. Vanessa turned to glare at me, tears streaming down her face, but I met her gaze without flinching. Julian put his arm around her and led her out of the courtroom, and I watched them go with no sympathy. Outside, my lawyer shook my hand. "The civil suit for damages will proceed separately, but this is a strong foundation. You should be able to recover costs for everything they destroyed or sold." I thanked him and walked to my car, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The legal victory was satisfying, but it was only the beginning. I had also taken additional steps that Vanessa did not yet know about, steps that would ensure she understood the full weight of her actions. During my final days in Boston, while coordinating with my lawyer, I had also contacted our mother. The conversation had been difficult. Our mother, Dorothy, lived in Seattle and had always favored Vanessa, making excuses for her behavior and pressuring me to be more understanding. When I explained what Vanessa had done, Dorothy's first response was to suggest I was overreacting. "She is your sister," Dorothy had said. "She made a mistake. You should forgive her." "A mistake is forgetting to return a phone call," I had replied, my voice hard. "This was deliberate theft and destruction. She sold grandmother's table, Mom. She threw away my belongings like trash. This was not a mistake." Dorothy had been silent for a long moment. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to stop enabling her," I had said. "I want you to understand that I am done being her safety net. She needs to face consequences, or she will never change." The conversation had ended awkwardly, but I had made my point. I had also contacted other family members, explaining the situation and making it clear that I would not tolerate anyone who tried to pressure me into dropping the legal proceedings. Some relatives had been supportive, others had been uncomfortable, but I had drawn my line and refused to back down. Now, driving home from the courthouse, I felt the weight of those decisions settling over me. Vanessa had been counting on family loyalty to protect her from the consequences of her actions, but I had shattered that expectation. She would find no refuge, no one willing to bail her out this time. Over the next few weeks, I focused on restoring my house. I hired professional cleaners to deep clean every surface, replaced the furniture that had been stolen or damaged, and slowly brought back the sense of peace that had once defined my home. I found most of my belongings in storage units that Vanessa and Julian had hastily rented when they realized they could not keep everything they had taken. The police had helped me locate the units and retrieve my property, though much of it was damaged beyond repair. The civil lawsuit moved forward steadily. Vanessa and Julian were unable to afford proper legal representation, and the court assigned them a public defender who advised them to settle. They refused, stubbornly insisting that I was being cruel and that they had only been trying to survive. The judge in the civil case was less patient than Judge Patricia had been, and when presented with the evidence of theft, property damage, and fraud, he ruled in my favor without hesitation. The settlement required Vanessa and Julian to pay me $32,000 in restitution for the damaged and stolen property, plus legal fees. It was an amount they could never hope to pay in full, which meant their wages would be garnished for years to come. The judgment would follow them, damaging their credit and limiting their opportunities. It was harsh, but I felt no guilt. They had stolen from me, violated my home, and shown no remorse. They deserved every consequence. But I was not finished. I had one final move to make, one that would ensure Vanessa truly understood the gravity of what she had done. During my investigation into the storage units, I had discovered something interesting. Julian had been using my house as a base for a small side business selling refurbished electronics. He had been buying broken devices, repairing them in my garage, and selling them online. It was not illegal, but he had never reported the income to the tax authorities. I had found receipts, invoices, and records of sales totaling nearly $15,000 over 6 months, none of which had been declared. I had given this information to my lawyer, who had quietly forwarded it to the appropriate government agencies. The investigation had been discreet, but I knew it was underway. Julian had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks after the civil suit concluded, I received a call from my lawyer. "I thought you would want to know," he said. "Julian has been audited by the tax authorities. They found substantial unreported income. He is facing penalties and possible criminal charges for tax evasion." I felt a grim satisfaction at the news. "And Vanessa?" "She was complicit," he said. "She helped him sell the items and accepted payments. She is also under investigation." I thanked him and hung up, then sat in my newly restored living room, looking around at the space I had fought so hard to reclaim. The house was mine again, but it felt different now. The violation had left invisible scars, a lingering sense of unease that I knew would take time to fully heal. Still, I had won. I had taken back what was mine, and I had ensured that Vanessa and Julian faced real consequences for their actions. It was not about revenge, I told myself. It was about justice. But late at night, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I wondered if that was entirely true. There was a part of me that had enjoyed watching Vanessa's face crumple in the courtroom, that had felt a cold satisfaction when I learned about the tax investigation. I had always been the responsible one, the one who followed the rules and worked hard for everything I achieved. Vanessa had always taken shortcuts, always expected the world to accommodate her. This time, the world had said no, and I had been the one to make it happen. 2 months after the eviction, I received a voicemail from Vanessa. Her voice was small and defeated, lacking the bravado and entitlement that had defined her for so long. "Christina," she said, "I know you probably won't listen to this, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I was desperate and stupid, and I thought you wouldn't care because you have so much. I didn't think about how much I was hurting you. Julian and I are living in a motel now, and we're both working extra shifts to try to pay off the judgment. The tax thing is a nightmare. I don't know how we're going to get through this. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it." I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. Her apology was too little, too late. She had not been sorry when she was throwing away my belongings or selling my grandmother's table. She was only sorry now because she was facing consequences. That was not real remorse. That was self-pity. I blocked her number and moved on with my life. I threw myself back into my work, taking on additional research projects and mentoring junior colleagues. I began dating again, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. I hosted dinner parties at my restored house, filling the rooms with laughter and conversation, replacing the bad memories with new, better ones. One evening, 6 months after the eviction, I sat on my porch swing with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jeffrey walked over from his yard, waving hello, and I invited him to join me. "You seem happy," he observed, settling into the chair beside me. "I am," I said, and realized it was true. "It took a while, but I feel like I've finally reclaimed this place. It's mine again." He nodded, sipping his own drink. "What happened with your sister? Have you heard from her?" "She left a voicemail a few months ago," I said. "An apology, I think. I deleted it." Jeffrey was quiet for a moment. "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't know. Maybe someday if she truly changes. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or letting her back into my life. She proved that I can't trust her. That's not something that can be easily repaired." "That's fair," he said. "You did what you had to do." "I did," I agreed. "And I would do it again." We sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, and I felt a sense of peace settle over me. My sister had tried to take everything I had built, and I had fought back with every resource at my disposal. I had been ruthless, perhaps, but I had been right. Some boundaries could not be crossed without consequences, and some betrayals could not be forgiven. The months rolled forward, and I settled into a new rhythm of life. My career continued to flourish as I published 2 groundbreaking papers on autoimmune research that attracted attention from major pharmaceutical companies. One morning in early spring, nearly 8 months after the eviction, I received an unexpected call from a colleague named Patricia, who worked in Seattle. We had collaborated on a research project years ago and maintained a friendly professional relationship. "Christina," she said, her voice carrying an odd mixture of excitement and hesitation. "I need to tell you something. I wasn't sure if I should, but I think you deserve to know. Your sister Vanessa applied for a job at my hospital. She listed you as a reference." I felt my grip tighten on the phone. "She did what?" Patricia continued carefully. "She applied for an administrative position in our billing department. When I saw your name on her application, I was surprised. Given your reputation, I assumed you two were close. But something felt off about the way she described your relationship. I decided to call you directly before proceeding with her application." My mind raced through the implications. Vanessa had not only used my name without permission, but she had presumably lied about our relationship to make herself appear more credible. It was another violation, another attempt to exploit our connection for her own benefit. "Patricia, I appreciate you calling," I said slowly. "Vanessa and I are estranged. She broke into my home while I was traveling for work, destroyed my property, and I had to pursue legal action to remove her. There was a court judgment against her for damages. I would not recommend her for any position, and I certainly never gave her permission to use me as a reference." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "I see," Patricia finally said. "Thank you for being honest with me. I'll make sure her application is rejected and note that she provided false information." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my coffee as it grew cold. Vanessa had learned nothing. Despite everything that had happened, despite the legal judgments and the financial consequences, she was still trying to manipulate situations to her advantage, still using connections she had no right to claim. The discovery reignited the anger I had worked so hard to move past. I called my lawyer and informed him about Vanessa's fraudulent use of my name as a reference. He listened carefully and then said, "This could be considered identity fraud, especially if she's been doing this with multiple applications. It might be worth investigating further." "Do it," I said without hesitation. "I want to know everywhere she has used my name, and I want documentation of every instance." Over the next 2 weeks, my lawyer hired a private investigator who discovered that Vanessa had listed me as a reference on 7 different job applications over the past 6 months. Some employers had never bothered to check references. Others had called the general number for my company and been told I did not know anyone by that name seeking employment verification. But several had simply accepted her word, and she had nearly secured 2 positions based partially on the false prestige of having me as a reference. Armed with this information, my lawyer sent cease and desist letters to Vanessa, warning her that any further unauthorized use of my name would result in additional legal action. We also contacted each employer she had applied to, informing them of the fraudulent references. 2 companies that had been considering her for positions immediately withdrew their offers. I felt a savage satisfaction at this development. Vanessa had not simply made one terrible mistake with my house. She was continuing to try to profit from her connection to me, showing a pattern of entitlement and deception that justified every harsh measure I had taken. But the situation took an unexpected turn when I received a call from my mother. Dorothy's voice was strained and accusatory when I answered. "Christina, what are you doing to your sister? She called me in tears yesterday. She said you're destroying her life, that you won't let her move on." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "I am not destroying her life, Mom. She destroyed her own life with her choices. I am simply protecting myself from further harm." "She made a mistake," Dorothy insisted. "A stupid, terrible mistake. But you've punished her enough. The court judgments, the money she owes you, the tax investigation. She's drowning, Christina. And now you're sabotaging her job applications?" "She used my name fraudulently as a reference," I said, my voice hard. "She lied to potential employers, claiming I would vouch for her character when she knows I would do no such thing. That is not me sabotaging her. That is me correcting her lies." Dorothy was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "When did you become so cold?" The question stung more than I wanted to admit. I became this way when my own sister violated my home and threw away everything I cared about like it was garbage. I became this way when I realized that being kind and forgiving was interpreted as weakness. Vanessa had every opportunity to make better choices. She chose not to. These are the consequences. "She's your family," Dorothy said, her voice breaking. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It meant everything to me," I replied. "Until she proved it meant nothing to her." "I'm done with this conversation, Mom. If you want to enable Vanessa's behavior, that's your choice, but I won't be part of it." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking. The call had dredged up emotions I had thought I had processed, forcing me to confront the isolation that came with my decisions. I had drawn clear boundaries, had refused to let family loyalty excuse theft and betrayal. But the cost was a fractured relationship with my mother, and the knowledge that some relatives viewed me as the villain in this story. That evening, I met with a small group of close friends at a wine bar in downtown Portland. These were people who had supported me throughout the ordeal, who had listened to my anger and frustration without judgment. I told them about the fraudulent references in my mother's call, and they rallied around me with the fierce loyalty that chosen family provides. My friend Diane, a corporate attorney, raised her glass. "You did the right thing every step of the way. Anyone who says otherwise doesn't understand what it's like to have their sanctuary violated. You had every right to protect yourself and to demand accountability." The others murmured agreement, and I felt some of the tension ease from my shoulders. These people understood. They saw the situation clearly, without the distorting lens of family obligation or misplaced sympathy. As spring turned to summer, I received periodic updates from my lawyer about Vanessa's situation. The tax penalties had been substantial, and both she and Julian were working multiple jobs to try to manage their debts. They had moved from the motel to a small apartment in a rough neighborhood, and according to court documents, they were struggling to make the monthly restitution payments ordered by the judge. Each missed payment extended the judgment and added additional fees, creating a cycle they seemed unable to escape. I felt no sympathy. They had created this situation through their own choices, and they were facing exactly the consequences they deserved. If anything, I wish the penalties were harsher. Wish there was some way to make them truly understand the depth of what they had taken from me. The physical property could be replaced, but the sense of security, the trust that my private space was inviolable, that could never be fully restored. In July, my lawyer called with unexpected news. "Vanessa has filed for bankruptcy," he said. "She's trying to discharge the debt she owes you through the court." I felt a surge of fury. "Can she do that?" "It's complicated," he said. "Debts arising from willful and malicious injury are generally not dischargeable in bankruptcy. We can contest it, arguing that her actions meet that standard. Given the court judgment and the documented evidence of her breaking into your home and destroying your property, we have a strong case." "Then contest it," I said firmly. "I want every dollar she owes me. I want her to spend years paying for what she did." The bankruptcy proceedings took months to resolve. My lawyer filed objections, presented evidence, and argued that Vanessa's actions had been intentional and malicious, meeting the legal standard for non-dischargeable debt. Vanessa's bankruptcy attorney tried to paint her as a desperate sister who had made a poor judgment call, but the documentation was overwhelming. The judge ruled in my favor, determining that the debt could not be discharged and would follow Vanessa regardless of her bankruptcy status. When my lawyer called to inform me of the ruling, I felt a profound sense of vindication. Vanessa would spend years, possibly decades, working to repay what she owed me. Every paycheck would be garnished, every tax refund seized, until the debt was satisfied. She would carry the weight of her choices for the rest of her life, a constant reminder that actions have consequences. But even as I celebrated the legal victory, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. Was this justice, or was it cruelty? Had I crossed a line somewhere, allowing my anger to transform into something darker? I pushed the thoughts away, reminding myself of the garbage bags full of my damaged belongings, the broken china, the sold furniture. I reminded myself that Vanessa had shown no real remorse, only self-pity when caught. I had done nothing wrong. I had simply refused to be a victim. In September, nearly a year after the initial eviction, I attended a pharmaceutical industry conference in San Francisco. During a networking reception, I struck up a conversation with a man named Gregory, who worked in hospital administration. We discussed healthcare policy and research funding, and the conversation flowed easily. Near the end of the evening, he mentioned that he was from Seattle, and we discovered we had several mutual colleagues. "Do you know Patricia from Seattle General?" I asked, and he nodded enthusiastically. "Great person to work with," he said. "She actually just helped us avoid a bad hire a few months ago. Someone who had falsified references. Patricia caught it and warned several of us in the network." I felt my chest tighten. "What happened to the applicant?" Gregory shrugged. "Word got around. She's basically blacklisted now in the Seattle Healthcare Administration community. It's a small world, and nobody wants to hire someone who lies on applications." I excused myself shortly after, claiming an early morning session, and returned to my hotel room. I sat on the edge of the bed, processing what I had learned. My decision to expose Vanessa's fraudulent references had rippled further than I had anticipated. She was not just facing consequences in isolated incidents. She had been effectively blacklisted in an entire professional community, her reputation destroyed before she could even establish it. I should have felt triumphant. This was exactly what I had wanted, was it not? For Vanessa to face the full weight of her actions, to be unable to escape the consequences of her choices. But instead, I felt hollow. The revenge I had pursued so relentlessly had achieved its goals, but the satisfaction I expected was nowhere to be found. I did not sleep well that night. I kept thinking about Vanessa's voicemail from months ago, the one I had deleted without truly listening to. I thought about my mother's question. When did you become so cold? I thought about the person I had been before all of this, someone who believed in second chances and the possibility of redemption. I had changed, hardened by betrayal into someone who pursued consequences with ruthless efficiency. I had won every legal battle, had ensured that Vanessa would pay for years to come, had destroyed her professional prospects in an entire city. I had won completely. But what had I won, exactly? I returned to Portland the next day and spent the weekend alone in my house, walking through rooms that felt both familiar and strange. I had restored everything to its original state, replaced what was lost, but something indefinable had changed. The house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a monument to what had been taken and reclaimed, a symbol of victory that felt increasingly Pyrrhic. On Monday morning, I did something I had not done in months. I unblocked Vanessa's number and listened to her voicemail again. Her voice, small and defeated, spoke of being sorry, of not understanding how much she had hurt me, of drowning in consequences. I listened to it 3 times, and on the 3rd time, I heard something I had missed before. Beneath the self-pity and the desperation, there was genuine remorse. It was buried under layers of excuses and justification, but it was there. I called my lawyer and asked him to prepare a document. I want to restructure the restitution agreement, I said. I want to reduce the monthly payments to something more manageable, and I want to include provisions that if she makes consistent payments for 3 years, I'll consider forgiving the remaining balance. He was silent for a long moment. Are you sure? You've won every legal battle. The current terms are enforceable. I'm sure, I said. Send the proposal to her attorney. Make it clear that this is a one-time offer. If she accepts and then violates the terms, the original judgment is reinstated in full, with no further opportunities for modification. The document was prepared and sent. 2 weeks later, I received a response. Vanessa had accepted the terms. Included with the legal documents was a handwritten letter. I almost threw it away without reading it, but something made me open it. The letter was 2 pages long, written in Vanessa's messy handwriting. It was not eloquent or particularly insightful, but it was honest. She wrote about her jealousy of my success, her resentment at always being the struggling younger sister, her desperation when their lease ended and they had nowhere to go. She wrote about making terrible choices in a moment of panic, convincing herself that I would not really care because I had so much. She wrote about understanding now, too late, what she had destroyed. She wrote about the crushing weight of the consequences, how every garnished paycheck and rejected job application reminded her of what she had done. She wrote that she did not expect forgiveness, but that she wanted me to know she finally understood. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I did not respond. I was not ready for reconciliation. Might never be ready. But I could acknowledge that she was finally facing reality. The consequences I had so carefully constructed had done their work. Whether they had actually changed her or simply beaten her down was something only time would tell. 3 months later, I received the first payment under the new agreement. It arrived on time, along with a brief note thanking me for the restructured terms. The following month, another payment arrived, again on time, and the month after that. Vanessa was meeting her obligations, slowly rebuilding some small measure of credibility. I continued with my life, achieving new milestones in my career and deepening friendships with people who valued honesty and integrity. My relationship with my mother remained strained but civil. We spoke occasionally, carefully avoiding topics that might reignite old arguments. She never apologized for defending Vanessa, and I never apologized for protecting myself. Some wounds, it seemed, would never fully heal. 2 years after the eviction, on a cold December evening, I was leaving my office when I saw someone standing near my car in the parking garage. My heart jumped, and my hand moved instinctively toward my phone, ready to call security. Then I recognized the figure. It was Vanessa. She looked different. Thinner, tired, with lines around her eyes that had not been there before. She held up her hands when she saw my reaction. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly. "I just wanted to talk to you. Just for a minute." I considered getting in my car and driving away. I considered calling security anyway. But something in her posture, defeated and humble, made me stay. "What do you want?" "I wanted to thank you," she said, and the words seemed to cost her something. "For the restructured payment plan. I know you didn't have to do that. I've been making the payments on time. I'll keep making them. And I wanted you to know that I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did, trying to be a better person. I know it's too late to fix things between us. I know you'll never trust me again. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to change." I looked at her for a long moment, searching for signs of manipulation or dishonesty. I found only exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine humility. "I hope you succeed," I said finally. "Not for me, but for yourself." She nodded, blinking back tears. "I really am sorry, Christina. For everything. I know saying it doesn't fix anything. But it's true." "I know," I said quietly. Then I got in my car and drove away, watching her figure recede in my rearview mirror. In the months that followed, the payments continued to arrive on time. Vanessa kept her distance, respecting the boundaries I had set. But through family channels, I heard that she had maintained her therapy, had found stable employment in a completely different field, and had separated from Julian, whose inability to take responsibility for his own actions had finally become too much for her to tolerate. She was rebuilding her life slowly, learning to live with the consequences of her choices, while trying to make better ones going forward. Vanessa and Julian never fully recovered from the cascading consequences of their actions. The court judgments, the garnished wages, and the professional blacklisting in Seattle's healthcare community combined to create a permanent ceiling on their opportunities. Julian's tax evasion charges resulted in 18 months of probation, community service, and a criminal record that barred him from many employment opportunities. He cycled through menial jobs, each one paying just enough to cover basic expenses and his share of the restitution. Within a year of the eviction, Vanessa left him, unable to shoulder the burden of his resentment and refusal to accept responsibility. He moved back in with his parents in Tacoma, a 38-year-old man sleeping in his childhood bedroom, working night shifts at a warehouse, and spending his weekends alone. Vanessa fared somewhat better after the restructured payment plan, but the years of consequences had taken their toll. She would spend the remainder of her 30s rebuilding her credit, her reputation, and her sense of self-worth, always carrying the weight of knowing she had destroyed her relationship with her only sister for a moment of desperate selfishness. As for me, I found peace not in vengeance but in reclamation. My house became a home again, filled with laughter and new memories that slowly overshadowed the violation. My career flourished, my friendships deepened, and I learned to trust again, carefully and selectively. I never fully reconciled with Vanessa, but I no longer needed to. I had drawn my boundaries, enforced my worth, and proven to myself that I would not accept being victimized by anyone, even family. The journey had been painful, and it had changed me in ways both good and difficult, but I had emerged stronger, clearer about who I was and what I would tolerate. Some people learn through gentle guidance. Others require the harsh lessons of consequences. I had provided those lessons without mercy, and though the cost had been a fractured family, I did not regret ensuring that my sister finally understood the weight of her actions. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst impulses, even when that refusal feels like cruelty.